The phone rang just as Daniel was about to leave for lunch. He almost didn't answer it. The number on the screen wasn't one he recognized, and he was already running late for a meeting with a client. But something made him pick it up anyway. "Hello, is this Daniel Foster?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded professional, like she was reading from a script. "Yes, this is Daniel," he said, grabbing his jacket with his free hand. "Mr. Foster, this is Nurse Patterson from County General Hospital. I'm calling from the maternity ward. We have a patient here who's in labor, and she's listed you as the father of her child." Daniel stopped moving. For a moment he wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. "I'm sorry, what?" he said. "Your name is listed on the intake form as the father. The mother's name is Carmen Rodriguez. She's about to give birth, and we need you to come to the hospital as soon as possible." Carmen. The name hit him like a punch to the stomach. He hadn't heard that name in over a year. Hadn't thought about her in months, if he was being honest. Their relationship had been brief, just 3 months, and it had ended so suddenly that he'd spent weeks wondering what he'd done wrong. "Are you sure?" Daniel asked. Are you sure she listed me?" "Yes, sir. Your name, phone number, and address are all on the form. She's asking for you." Daniel sat down in his office chair. His legs felt weak. "I'll be there," he heard himself say. "Give me 20 minutes." He hung up and stared at the wall. His mind was racing, trying to do the math. Over a year ago. That meant if this baby was his, Carmen had been pregnant when she left him. She would have known. She must have known. The memory came back sharp and clear. They'd met at a weekend painting class at the community center. Daniel had signed up on a whim, thinking he needed a hobby outside of work. Carmen had been sitting at the easel next to his, and she'd laughed at his terrible attempt to paint a bowl of fruit. "It looks like the apples are trying to escape," she'd said, but not in a mean way. Her eyes had been kind. They'd gone for coffee after class, then dinner the next week. Then suddenly they were spending every weekend together. Carmen worked at a bakery, waking up at 4 in the morning to make bread. She had flour on her clothes most of the time, and she always smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. She was funny and smart, and had this way of listening to people that made them feel like they mattered. Daniel had started to think she might be the one. He'd even looked at rings online, though he never told anyone that. Then one day she'd just ended it. No warning, no real explanation. They'd been planning to go to a concert that weekend, and she'd called him and said she couldn't see him anymore. When he'd asked why, she'd said something vague about needing space and not being ready for a relationship. He'd tried to talk to her to understand, but she'd been firm. It was over. He'd driven to her apartment twice, but she hadn't answered the door even though he could see her lights on. After the second time, he'd gotten the message and stopped trying. It hurt too much anyway. Now, sitting in his office with the phone still in his hand, Daniel realized she must have found out she was pregnant right around that time, and instead of telling him, she disappeared from his life completely. His phone buzzed. A text from his girlfriend, Lisa. "Still meeting for lunch?" Daniel stared at the message. Lisa. He'd been dating her for 6 months now. Things were good between them. Easy. Comfortable. She knew about Carmen, knew that Daniel had been in a relationship before, but he'd never told her much about it. There hadn't seemed to be any point. How was he supposed to tell her about this? He texted back. "Something came up at work. Can we reschedule? I'm really sorry, it felt wrong to lie," but he didn't know what else to say, not yet. Not until he understood what was happening. Daniel grabbed his car keys and headed for the elevator. His boss, Kevin, caught him in the hallway. "Hey, you heading to lunch? Want to grab something together?" "I can't," Daniel said. "Family emergency? I have to go." The lie came easier the second time, which somehow made him feel worse. The drive to County General took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Daniel's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He kept running through scenarios in his head. Maybe Carmen had made a mistake. Maybe she'd meant to list someone else. Maybe this was all a huge misunderstanding. But why would she list him if the baby wasn't his? And why now, after all this time? He found parking and walked into the hospital. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. The smell hit him immediately, that distinctive hospital smell of antiseptic and floor cleaner. A volunteer at the information desk directed him to the maternity ward on the 4th floor. The elevator ride up felt like descending into deep water. Everything seemed muffled and distant. When the doors opened, he saw signs pointing to labor and delivery. He followed them. his footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. At the nurse's station, a woman with kind eyes and gray hair looked up at him. Her name tag said Patterson. "Can I help you?" She asked. "I'm Daniel Foster. You called me about Carmen Rodriguez." Recognition crossed her face. "Oh yes, Mr. Foster, thank you for coming. She's in room 412. Down the hall, third door on the right." Daniel nodded but didn't move. His feet felt glued to the floor. "Is she okay?" he asked. "She's doing fine. The baby will be here soon. She'll be glad you're here." Daniel forced himself to walk. The hallway seemed impossibly long. He passed other rooms where he could hear voices, the sound of monitors beeping, a baby crying. Normal sounds of life happening. His own life felt anything but normal right now. He stopped outside room 412. Through the small window in the door, he could see a figure in the bed. Carmen. Even from here, even after all this time, he recognized her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired. More than tired. Exhausted. Daniel knocked softly and pushed the door open. Carmen's eyes flew to his face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He saw surprise there and relief and something else. Fear, maybe. Or shame. "Daniel," she said. Her voice cracked. "You came." He stepped into the room and let the door close behind him. "The hospital called me. They said you were in labor. That you listed me as the father." Carmen's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call. I have nobody else." Daniel moved closer to the bed. Up close, he could see how much weight she'd lost in her face despite being pregnant. Her hands on top of the blanket were thinner than he remembered. She looked like someone who'd been struggling for a long time. "Carmen, what's going on? Where have you been? Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" A tear rolled down her cheek. "I was scared," she whispered. "I got so scared, Daniel. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I didn't know what to do." "You could have told me," Daniel said. He was surprised by how calm his voice sounded when his heart was racing. "We could have figured it out together. I know. I know that now. But back then, all I could think about was running. That's what I always do when things get hard. I run." Before Daniel could respond, Carmen gasped and gripped the bed rail. Her whole body tensed. A contraction. He'd seen enough movies to know what that looked like. A nurse came in, checked the monitors, and examined Carmen. "You're at 8 centimeters, she said cheerfully. "Won't be long now. Are you going to stay?" She directed this question at Daniel. He looked at Carmen. She was looking back at him with those same dark eyes he remembered. The ones that had first caught his attention in that painting class. She looked terrified and hopeful at the same time. "Can I?" Carmen asked him. "Will you stay?" Daniel thought about Lisa waiting for his call. He thought about his life, his carefully organized life with its routines and plans. He thought about how he'd spent the last year getting over Carmen, moving on, building something new. Then he thought about his own father, who'd left when Daniel was 5 years old. He thought about growing up without a dad, watching his mom work 2 jobs to keep them afloat. He thought about all the times he'd needed a father and had no one to call. "Yes," Daniel said. "I'll stay." The relief on Carmen's face was instant. She reached out her hand and without thinking, he took it. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much." Over the next hour, Daniel stayed by Carmen's side. He held her hand through contractions. He got her ice chips when she asked. He listened as she tried to explain between waves of pain. She'd moved to a different neighborhood. She'd been working at a different bakery and taking night shifts at a grocery store, trying to save money. She'd been living in a basement apartment with a landlord who was threatening to evict her. "I wanted to do it on my own," she said. "I wanted to prove I could. But I can't. I tried, Daniel. I really tried, but I can't do this alone." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He was still trying to process everything. Part of him was angry that she'd kept this from him. Part of him was scared about what this meant for his life. But another part of him, a part he didn't fully understand yet, felt something else. Something that felt almost like purpose. "It's time," the nurse said, coming back into the room with a doctor. "Let's have this baby." What happened next was a blur. The doctor and nurses moved around Carmen with practiced efficiency. They told her to push. She squeezed Daniel's hand so hard he thought she might break his fingers. She cried out in pain. Daniel found himself saying things he didn't remember deciding to say. Things like, "You're doing great and almost there," and "I'm right here." And then suddenly, There was a cry. Not Carmen's cry. A different cry. Small and angry and brand new. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, squirming, impossibly small human being. Daniel stared. He'd never seen anything like this. The baby was covered in fluid and vernix, her face scrunched up, her tiny fists waving in the air. She was the most fragile thing he'd ever seen. They cleaned her quickly and wrapped her in a blanket. The nurse brought her over and placed her in Carmen's arms. Carmen looked down at her daughter and started crying in earnest now, big sobbing tears that shook her whole body. "She's perfect," Carmen whispered. "She's so perfect." The baby had stopped crying. Her eyes were trying to open, searching for something. Daniel couldn't look away. He watched as tiny fingers stretched out from the blanket, no bigger than flower petals. "Would you like to hold her?" the nurse asked Daniel. He started to say no, started to explain that he shouldn't, that he wasn't sure, that this was all happening too fast. But Carmen was already holding the baby out to him. "Please," Carmen said. "Please hold her." Daniel's hands moved before his brain caught up. The nurse showed him how to support the baby's head. Then she was in his arms. This tiny person who weighed almost nothing. She was warm through the blanket. Her eyes finally opened, just a crack, and seemed to look right at him. Something happened in that moment. Daniel felt it in his chest, like a door opening that he hadn't known was there. This baby, this little girl who might or might not be his biological daughter, felt real in a way nothing else had in a long time. "What's her name?" Daniel asked quietly. Carmen smiled through her tears. "Sophia. Her name is Sophia." "Hello, Sophia," Daniel whispered. The baby made a small sound, something between a coo and a sigh. Her tiny hand found his finger and wrapped around it with surprising strength. He looked down at her small face, at her button nose, and the way her lips pursed slightly as she settled into sleep. Behind him, he heard the nurse say something about paperwork and birth certificates. He heard the doctor giving instructions to Carmen about recovery. But it all seemed distant now, like sounds from another room. All Daniel could think about was the weight of this baby in his arms and the feeling that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't begin to understand. Carmen was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but also something else. Hope, maybe. "I don't have anywhere to take her," Carmen said suddenly, her voice small. "The landlord locked me out last week when I couldn't pay rent. I've been staying with someone from work, but she said I couldn't bring a baby there. I don't have a crib or any supplies. I don't have anything ready." Daniel looked up from Sophia's face. "What do you mean you don't have anywhere to go?" "They're going to discharge me in 2 days, and I have nowhere to take her. That's why I called you. I know I have no right to ask. I know I messed everything up, but I didn't know what else to do." The nurse had come back with a clipboard. "Dad, we need you to fill out some forms." Daniel opened his mouth to correct her, to explain that he wasn't sure he was the father, that this was all very complicated. But then he looked down at Sophia, still asleep in his arms, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. "Okay," he heard himself say. "What do you need?" Daniel sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair next to Carmen's bed, watching her sleep. Sophia was in the small plastic bassinet beside her mother, wrapped tight in a hospital blanket with pink and blue stripes. It was 2 a.m, and the maternity ward was quiet except for the occasional cry from another room. He hadn't left the hospital. That had been 6 hours ago when the nurse had asked if he was staying the night. Carmen had looked at him with those exhausted, hopeful eyes, and he'd nodded. Now he was here, wide awake. While both Carmen and Sophia slept peacefully, his phone buzzed for the 10th time. Lisa. He'd sent her a text hours ago saying he had a family emergency and would explain everything tomorrow. She'd been understanding at first, but now her messages were getting worried. The last one said, "Daniel, please just call me. I'm getting scared. Are you okay?" He should call her. He knew that. But what would he even say? How could he explain this situation when he barely understood it himself? Daniel looked at Sophia. She was making small movements in her sleep, her tiny mouth opening and closing like she was dreaming about eating. She had a little bit of dark hair, just like Carmen. Her nose was small and perfect. He wondered if she had his eyes. He wouldn't know for a while. Baby's eyes changed color, didn't they? The thought hit him suddenly. He didn't even know if she was his. Carmen had said she was, had listed him on the paperwork, but they hadn't done any test. Maybe he should ask for one. Maybe he had a right to know for sure before he made any decisions, but then what? If Sophia wasn't his, would he just walk away? Leave Carmen and this baby with nowhere to go? He thought about his own father again. Michael Foster. Daniel barely remembered him. Just flashes of memory. A man who smelled like cigarettes and aftershave. A voice yelling behind closed doors. Then nothing. His mother never talked about why Michael left, but Daniel had always assumed it was because being a father was too hard. Too much responsibility. Was that who Daniel wanted to be? Carmen stirred in her sleep and winced. The nurse had said she'd be sore for a while. They'd had to do some stitches. Daniel had stood outside during that part, feeling queasy and useless. A different nurse came in, one he hadn't seen before. She was younger, maybe in her 30s, with kind eyes and braids pulled back in a bun. "You're still here," she said softly, checking Carmen's IV. "That's nice. A lot of fathers don't stay the whole night." "I'm not sure I'm the father," Daniel said before he could stop himself. The nurse looked at him, then at Carmen, then back at him. "Does she know you feel that way?" "I don't know what I feel," Daniel admitted. "This all happened so fast." The nurse finished checking the monitors and walked over to where Daniel sat. She kept her voice low so she wouldn't wake Carmen. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "I've worked in this ward for 8 years. I've seen all kinds of situations. Fathers who are overjoyed. Fathers who are terrified. Fathers who run. But you know what makes someone a real father? It's not biology. It's showing up. And you're here. That counts for something." She left the room quietly. Daniel sat there turning her words over in his mind. Showing up. Was it really that simple? Sophia started to fuss. Small whimpering sounds that grew louder. Carmen's eyes opened immediately. That new mother instinct already kicking in even though she'd only been a mother for a few hours. "Hey, sweet girl," Carmen murmured, trying to sit up and wincing at the pain. "Let me get her," Daniel said, standing up. He lifted Sophia carefully from the bassinet, supporting her head the way the nurse had shown him. She was crying harder now, her face scrunched up and red. "She's probably hungry," Carmen said, reaching for her. Daniel handed Sophia over and watched as Carmen struggled to position the baby for feeding. It took several tries. Sophia was upset and wouldn't latch properly. Carmen started to cry from frustration and pain. "I can't even do this right," she said. "I'm a terrible mother already." "You've been a mother for 6 hours," Daniel said gently. "Give yourself a break." He pressed the call button. The nurse with the braids came back in and spent the next 20 minutes helping Carmen figure out how to feed Sophia. Finally, the baby latched on and started eating. The relief on Carmen's face was immediate. "Thank you," Carmen said to the nurse. Then she looked at Daniel. "Thank you for staying. I know you didn't have to." "Carmen, we need to talk," Daniel said once the nurse left. "About what happens when they discharge you." Carmen's face fell. "I know, I'm trying to figure it out. I called my friend Yolanda from the bakery. She said I could maybe stay with her for a few days, but she has 3 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. There's no room for me and a baby." "What about your family?" Daniel asked, though he realized he'd never met any of Carmen's family when they were dating. She'd always change the subject when he asked about them. "No," Carmen said quickly. "That's not an option. Carmen, I mean it, Daniel. I can't go back there. I won't." There was something in her voice that made him stop pushing. "Fear, real fear." "Okay," he said. "Then what's the plan?" Carmen looked down at Sophia, who was still nursing peacefully. "I have a little bit of money saved. Maybe enough for a motel for a week. Then I can go back to work at the bakery. Yolanda said they'd hold my job. I can find a daycare, or maybe someone who watches babies in their home. It'll be tight, but I can make it work." Daniel did the math in his head. A motel for a week, even a cheap one, would eat up most of her savings. Then she'd need money for food, diapers, formula if she couldn't breastfeed, clothes for the baby, medical bills, and that was before she even found a place to live. A real place, not a motel room. "You can't go back to work right away," he said. "The doctor said you need at least 6 weeks to recover." "I don't have 6 weeks," Carmen said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were filling with tears again. "I have maybe 2 weeks before the money runs out. Then I don't know what I'll do." Sophia had fallen asleep while eating. Carmen carefully adjusted her and set her back in the bassinet. They both watched her sleep for a moment. "Come stay with me," Daniel said. The words were out before he'd fully thought them through. But once he said them, he knew they were right. Or at least he knew he couldn't not say them. Carmen stared at him. What? Come stay at my apartment. Both of you. Just until you get back on your feet. I have a spare room. It's small, but it's better than a motel. You can recover properly. We can figure out what you need for the baby. Then once you're healed, you can look for a place and go back to work. Daniel, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Carmen shook her head. You have a life. You probably have a girlfriend. I can't just move into your apartment with a baby. Daniel thought about Lisa. She was going to lose her mind when she found out about this. He might lose her over this. The thought hurt, but not as much as he'd expected. Let me worry about that, he said. Right now, the question is whether you and Sophia have a safe place to go when you leave here. And I'm telling you that you do. Carmen was crying again. Why are you doing this? After everything I did to you. After I just disappeared without explaining anything. I don't know, Daniel said honestly. Maybe because I know what it's like to grow up without a father. Or maybe because it's the right thing to do. Does it matter why? It matters to me, Carmen said. I need to know you're not just doing this because you feel guilty or obligated. Daniel looked at Sophia again. She was sleeping with one tiny fist near her face, her expression peaceful and content. I held her, he said quietly. When she was born, I held her and something changed. I can't explain it better than that. I just know I can't walk away. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Carmen spoke. Okay, but just for a little while. Just until I can get on my feet. Okay, Daniel agreed. The next day was a blur of activity. Daniel left the hospital early to go to his apartment and clear out his home office. He'd been using the second bedroom as a workspace, but it could easily be converted into a bedroom for Carmen and Sophia. He moved his desk and computer into his own bedroom, piling everything in the corner. Then he went to a store and bought sheets, towels, a changing table, and more baby supplies than he knew what to do with. The woman at the baby store had looked at his list and laughed. First time, Dad? She'd asked. He'd just nodded and let her help him. She added things he hadn't thought of. Burp cloths, a baby monitor, something called a diaper pail, bottles even though Carmen was breastfeeding. Because you never knew. A pacifier, baby soap that was gentle on sensitive skin. His credit card took a serious hit, but he didn't care. He loaded everything into his car and drove back to the apartment. By the time he was done setting up, the room looked completely different. There was a crib he'd assembled himself, following the instructions 3 times before he got it right. The changing table was stocked with diapers and wipes. Clean sheets were on the bed. It wasn't perfect, but it was ready. Then he drove back to the hospital. On the way, he finally called Lisa. Daniel, where have you been? She answered immediately. I've been worried sick. I know. I'm sorry. Can you meet me somewhere? We need to talk. They met at a coffee shop near Lisa's apartment. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with her arms crossed. She looked upset and scared. What's going on? She asked as soon as he sat down. You've been gone for over a day. You wouldn't tell me anything. I thought something terrible had happened. Something did happen, Daniel said, but not the way you think. He told her everything. About Carmen. About the phone call from the hospital. About Sophia. About how he'd stayed at the hospital and helped with the birth. About his decision to let them stay with him. Lisa listened without interrupting. Her expression went from confused to shocked, to hurt, to angry, and back to hurt again. You're letting your ex-girlfriend move in with you, she said when he finished. With her baby. That might be your baby. Yes, Daniel said. For how long? I don't know. A few weeks. Maybe longer. And you didn't think to discuss this with me first? To ask how I felt about it? There wasn't time, Daniel said. She's getting discharged tomorrow. She has nowhere else to go. That's not your responsibility, Lisa said. Her voice was getting louder. A couple at the next table glanced over. You don't even know if that baby is yours. She could be lying. She could be using you. She's not lying, Daniel said, though he realized he didn't actually know that for sure. How do you know? Did you do a paternity test? No. Then you don't know anything. Daniel, I can't believe you're doing this. We've been together for 6 months. I thought we had something good. And now you're just throwing it away for some woman who broke your heart? And a baby that might not even be yours? I'm not throwing anything away, Daniel said. But I can't ignore this. I can't pretend it isn't happening. Lisa wiped her eyes. She was crying now, trying to keep it quiet. You're choosing her. That's what this is. I'm not choosing anyone. I'm just trying to do the right thing. The right thing for who? Not for me. Not for us. They sat there for a long moment. Daniel wanted to reach for her hand to comfort her somehow, but he didn't think she'd let him. I need some time, Lisa finally said. I need to think about whether I can be okay with this. With you living with your ex and her baby. I understand, Daniel said, do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already made your choice. You're picking them over me. That's not fair. Maybe not. But it's how it feels. Lisa stood up, grabbing her purse. Call me when you've figured out what you really want. But Daniel, if you're expecting me to wait around while you play house with Carmen, you're going to be disappointed. She left without looking back. Daniel sat there for a while, staring at his untouched coffee. Part of him wanted to run after her, to apologize, to promise he'd figure out another solution. But another part of him knew he'd meant what he said. He couldn't walk away from this. The next day, Daniel picked up Carmen and Sophia from the hospital. A nurse wheeled Carmen out in a wheelchair, hospital policy for all patients being discharged. Sophia was strapped into a car seat that Daniel had installed that morning after watching 3 tutorial videos. Carmen was quiet during the drive to his apartment. She stared out the window, holding her discharge papers and a folder full of information about newborn care. Are you okay? Daniel asked. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't know how to be a mother. What if I mess this up? Then we'll figure it out together, Daniel said. Everyone's scared their first time. When they got to the apartment, Daniel carried Sophia in the car seat while Carmen walked slowly behind him. She was still sore from the delivery. He unlocked the door and held it open for her. Carmen stepped inside and stopped. She looked around the living room, then down the hall toward the bedrooms. Which room is mine? She asked. The second bedroom. I set it up this morning. Carmen walked down the hall and pushed open the door. Daniel watched from the doorway as she took in the crib, the changing table, all the supplies he'd bought. She turned to look at him, and there were tears streaming down her face again. You did all this? For us? It's not much, Daniel said. But it's a start. Carmen sat down on the edge of the bed, careful of her stitches. She put her face in her hands and cried. Not sad crying, Daniel thought. Something else. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Sophia started to fuss in her car seat. Daniel unbuckled her and picked her up, holding her against his chest the way he'd learned at the hospital. She settled immediately, making those small baby sounds. Welcome home, he said softly, not sure if he was talking to Sophia or Carmen or both of them. Carmen looked up at him. This man who'd shown up when she called, who'd stayed at the hospital, who'd given them a place to live. Thank you, she whispered. I promise I'll pay you back somehow. I promise I won't take advantage of this. I know, Daniel said. But as he stood there in the doorway of his spare bedroom, holding a baby who might or might not be his daughter, with his ex-girlfriend crying on the bed, and his current girlfriend probably never wanting to speak to him again, Daniel realized he had no idea what he'd just gotten himself into. All he knew was that it was too late to turn back now. The first night was the hardest. Sophia woke up every 2 hours crying for food. Each time, Daniel would hear Carmen shuffling down the hall to warm a bottle, or sit in the rocking chair he'd bought at the last minute. He'd lie awake in his own bed, listening to the sounds of a baby in his apartment, wondering what he'd done. By morning, he was exhausted even though he hadn't been the one getting up. Carmen looked worse. She had dark circles under her eyes and moved like everything hurt, which it probably did. I'm sorry, she said when Daniel came into the kitchen. She was holding Sophia and trying to make coffee one-handed. I tried to keep her quiet. Don't apologize, Daniel said, taking the coffee pot from her. Sit down. I'll make breakfast. He scrambled eggs while Carmen fed Sophia. It felt strange, this domestic scene. A week ago, his biggest concern had been whether to buy the expensive coffee beans or stick with his regular brand. Now he was making breakfast for his ex-girlfriend and a newborn baby. His phone rang. His mother. Daniel stared at it for a moment before answering. Hi, Mom. Daniel, where have you been? I've been calling you for 2 days. You never miss our Sunday phone call. Daniel looked at Carmen, who was watching him nervously. Something came up. I'm sorry I didn't call back. Well, what came up? Are you all right? There was no good way to explain this. Daniel took a breath. Mom, can you come over today? There's something I need to tell you in person. You're scaring me. Are you sick? No, I'm not sick. Just come over, okay? Around 1? His mother agreed, though she sounded worried. Daniel hung up and realized Carmen looked even more anxious than before. You don't have to tell your mother about us, Carmen said. I don't want to cause problems with your family. She's going to find out eventually, Daniel said. Better to tell her now. At exactly 1 o'clock, his mother knocked on the door. Patricia Foster was a small woman who worked as a school secretary and had opinions about everything. She'd raised Daniel alone after his father left, and she'd done it with strength and fierce determination. She was also not someone who held back what she thought. All right, what's this big emergency? She asked as soon as Daniel opened the door. Then she saw Carmen sitting on the couch holding Sophia. She froze. Daniel, what's going on? Mom, this is Carmen Rodriguez. We used to date. And this is Sophia. She was born 3 days ago. His mother's eyes went wide. She looked at the baby, at Carmen, at Daniel, then back at the baby. That's a newborn. Yes. And you're the father? Carmen says I am. His mother's expression hardened. She turned to Carmen. You say he's the father? You don't know for sure? Mom, Daniel said, but Carmen interrupted. It's okay. She looked at Patricia directly. Daniel is Sophia's father. I know he is. I wasn't with anyone else when she was conceived. Then why didn't you tell him you were pregnant? Patricia demanded. Where have you been for the last year? I was scared, Carmen said quietly. I made a mistake. I know that now. Patricia crossed her arms. A mistake. You kept my son from knowing he had a child on the way and you call that a mistake? Mom, stop, Daniel said. This isn't helping. Not helping? Daniel, this woman shows up out of nowhere with a baby and you just believe her? Did you do a paternity test? Not yet. Not yet. What are you thinking? She could be lying. She could be taking advantage of you. She's not, Daniel said, though Lisa had said almost the exact same thing yesterday. And even if there was some doubt, she has nowhere to go. She and Sophia need help. His mother's face softened slightly when she looked at the baby. Sophia was awake now, looking around with those unfocused newborn eyes. Patricia moved closer and sat down on the other end of the couch. Can I hold her? She asked Carmen. Carmen carefully transferred Sophia into Patricia's arms. Daniel watched as his mother looked down at the baby, and he saw her expression change. It was the same thing that had happened to him at the hospital. Something about holding Sophia made her real in a way words couldn't. She's beautiful, Patricia said softly. She looks like you did when you were born, Daniel. Same nose. They all sat there for a moment. Then Sophia started to cry, that urgent newborn cry that demanded immediate attention. Carmen took her back and started to feed her. Patricia turned to Daniel. Can we talk in the kitchen? In the kitchen, his mother closed the door and kept her voice low. Daniel, I need you to think about what you're doing. I understand you want to help. You've always had a good heart, but you can't just let people move in with you because you feel sorry for them. It's not about feeling sorry for her, Daniel said. Then what is it about? You barely know this woman. You dated for 3 months over a year ago. I know. But when I held Sophia at the hospital, something happened. I can't explain it better than that. His mother studied his face. What about Lisa? Does she know about this? We broke up. Or we're taking a break. I'm not sure which. Patricia sighed and sat down at the kitchen table. Your father left us when you were 5 years old. Did you know that before he left I was pregnant? Daniel stared at her. What? I miscarried at 3 months. He left 2 weeks later. I always wondered if that's why he ran. If the idea of another child was too much for him. She looked up at Daniel. I've never told you this because I didn't want you to think you weren't enough for him. But maybe you need to hear it now. Your father ran because he was weak, not because of anything you did or didn't do. I know that, Mom. Do you? Because it seems to me like you're trying very hard not to be him. And that's good. But you need to be sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Not just because you're afraid of being like Michael Foster. Daniel sat down across from her. Maybe that's part of it. But I also know what it's like to grow up without a father. And I know what you went through raising me alone. If Sophia is my daughter, I don't want her to go through that. And even if she's not, Carmen needs help right now. Is it so wrong to give it to her? His mother reached across the table and took his hand. No, sweetheart. It's not wrong. It's actually very right. But it's also very hard. Being a parent is the hardest thing you'll ever do. And if you're going to do this, you need to be all in. You can't change your mind in a month when it gets difficult. I know. I'm not sure you do, but I'm going to help you anyway, because that's what family does. His mother stayed the rest of the afternoon. She showed Carmen how to burp Sophia properly and shared tricks for soothing a fussy baby. She made a list of things Daniel would need to buy and gave him the number of a pediatrician she trusted. By the time she left, she was calling Sophia her granddaughter, though Daniel noticed she was still cautious around Carmen. The next few days fell into a routine. Daniel took time off work, telling his boss he had a family emergency. Carmen was still recovering from the delivery, so Daniel did most of the work. He changed diapers, though the first few times made him gag. He learned how to swaddle Sophia tight like a burrito. He walked around the apartment at 2 a.m, bouncing her gently when she wouldn't stop crying. It was exhausting. It was overwhelming. But it was also something else. Every time Sophia fell asleep in his arms or grabbed his finger with her tiny hand, or looked at him with those dark eyes, Daniel felt that same feeling from the hospital. Like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Carmen was struggling, though. She cried a lot, more than seemed normal. She'd be fine 1 minute, then sobbing the next. She barely ate. She had trouble sleeping even when Sophia was asleep. On the 5th day, Daniel found her sitting on the bathroom floor, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Sophia was in her crib screaming. "Carmen, what's wrong?" Daniel asked, kneeling next to her. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "I'm a terrible mother. I can't even tell what she needs. She won't stop crying and I don't know what to do. She's probably just hungry. I fed her 20 minutes ago. What if something's wrong with her? What if I'm doing everything wrong?" Daniel helped Carmen up and led her back to the bedroom. He picked up Sophia, who immediately started to calm down. Sometimes babies just needed to be held. "I think we should call the doctor," Daniel said gently. "Not for Sophia, for you." "I'm fine." "Carmen, you're not fine. This is more than just being tired." The doctor they called that afternoon said it sounded like postpartum depression. It was common, she explained, especially in new mothers who were under stress. She prescribed medication and gave them the number for a therapist who specialized in new parents. "I'm sorry," Carmen said after the appointment. "I'm making everything harder." "You're not making anything harder," Daniel said. "You just had a baby. Your hormones are all over the place. It's going to take time." But Carmen's family situation came up again a week later. They were eating dinner, takeout Chinese food because neither of them had the energy to cook, when someone knocked on the door. Daniel opened it to find a woman who looked like an older version of Carmen. Same dark hair, same eyes, but harder somehow, colder. "Is Carmen here?" the woman asked. Carmen appeared in the hallway behind Daniel. Her face went pale. "Mama!" The woman pushed past Daniel into the apartment. She started speaking rapid Spanish, her voice getting louder with each sentence. Carmen responded in Spanish too, her voice shaking. Daniel stood there feeling helpless, unable to understand what they were saying, but hearing the anger in the older woman's voice. Finally, Carmen switched to English. "No, Mama, I'm not coming home. You're living in sin with this man," her mother said, also in English now. "With a baby. What will people say? What will Father Rodriguez say when he hears? I don't care what anyone says. You never cared. Always so selfish. Always thinking only of yourself." Carmen's mother turned to Daniel. "And you. You should be ashamed, taking advantage of a vulnerable young woman." "He's not taking advantage of me," Carmen said. "He's helping me, which is more than you ever did. How dare you? After everything I sacrificed for you." "Sacrificed? You mean like when you told me I was worthless? Or when you locked me in my room for getting a B in math? Or when you said I'd never amount to anything?" Daniel could see where this was going. He stepped between them. "I think you should leave." Carmen's mother looked at him with disgust. "You're going to regret this. Both of you. That baby will grow up knowing her mother is a sinner who abandoned her family." "Get out," Carmen said. Her voice was steady now, stronger than Daniel had heard it in days. "Get out and don't come back." Her mother left, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Sophia started crying from the noise. Carmen picked her up and held her close, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said. "Is that why you left?" Daniel asked. "Your family?" Carmen nodded. "My mother has always been like that. Controlling, critical. Nothing I did was ever good enough. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I couldn't go back there. I couldn't raise Sophia in that environment. You should have told me. I know. I was just so scared of everything. Scared of being a mother. Scared of not being good enough. Scared that you'd reject me too. Daniel sat down next to her. I'm not going to reject you. Or Sophia. But Carmen, we need to figure out what we're doing here. This can't just be temporary anymore. If we're going to do this, we need a real plan. What kind of plan? I don't know yet. But we'll figure it out together. That night after Carmen had gone to bed, Daniel got a text from Lisa. I saw you at the grocery store today with a woman and a baby. I guess you made your choice. He stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, I'm sorry. You deserved better than this. She didn't respond. Daniel checked on Sophia before going to his own bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her little chest rising and falling with each breath. He watched her for a moment, thinking about everything that had changed in just over a week. He'd lost his girlfriend. His mother was worried about him. His boss was getting impatient about when he'd return to work. He was exhausted all the time. His apartment smelled like diapers no matter how often he took out the trash. But when he looked at Sophia, none of that seemed to matter as much. She was depending on him. Carmen was depending on him. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to depend on them too. The next morning brought a new challenge. Daniel's boss called. Daniel, I need you back in the office. We have the Henderson project deadline coming up and you're the lead architect on it. I know. I just need a few more days. You've been gone for 2 weeks. How much longer is this family emergency going to last? Daniel looked at Carmen feeding Sophia in the rocking chair. I'm not sure. Maybe I need to take family leave. Family leave is for established families. You're not married. You don't have any kids on record. I might have a daughter. There was a long pause. You might have a daughter? Daniel, what's going on? Daniel explained the situation as briefly as he could. When he finished, his boss sighed. Look, I sympathize, but I have a business to run. If you can't commit to being here, I need to bring someone else onto the Henderson project. I understand. Do you? Because it sounds like you're choosing this woman and her baby over your career. Everyone kept saying that. Choosing. Like life was a series of either-or decisions instead of complicated situations that didn't have clear answers. I'm choosing to be responsible, Daniel said. If that costs me the Henderson project, so be it. He hung up and realized Carmen had heard everything. You're going to lose your job because of me, she said. I'm not going to lose my job. I might lose one project. But 3 days later, his boss called again. Daniel, I'm sorry, but I have to let you go. You're a great architect, but I need someone I can rely on to be here. Just like that, Daniel was unemployed. He told Carmen that night after Sophia was asleep. This is all my fault, Carmen said. You've lost everything because of me. I haven't lost everything, Daniel said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. I'll find another job. What if you can't? What if I ruined your whole life? Daniel looked at her tired face, at the way she held herself like she expected to be yelled at any second. He thought about her mother's visit, about the things Carmen had revealed about her childhood. He understood now why she'd run when she found out she was pregnant. She'd been running her whole life. You didn't ruin anything, he said firmly. Things are just changing, that's all. We'll figure it out. But alone in his room that night, Daniel allowed himself to feel the weight of everything. He'd lost his girlfriend, his job, and his old life. He was living with a woman he'd dated for 3 months over a year ago, and a baby who might not even be his. What was he doing? Was everyone right? Was he making a huge mistake? Then he heard Sophia cry, and Carmen's exhausted footsteps in the hall. He got up and went to help without even thinking about it. Because that's what you did for family. And somehow, without him quite realizing when it happened, that's what they'd become. 3 weeks after losing his job, Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table going through his bank statements when Carmen came in holding an envelope. Her hands were shaking. This came in the mail today, she said. It's addressed to you, but it's about me. Daniel took the envelope. It was from a law office downtown. He opened it and read the letter inside twice before he fully understood what it said. Someone's suing you for custody of Sophia, he said, looking up at Carmen. Who's Roberto Alvarez? Carmen's face went white. She sat down hard in the chair across from him. He's Sophia's biological father. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. What? I should have told you, Carmen said quickly. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. Daniel's mind was racing. You said I was the father. At the hospital, on all the paperwork, you said it was me. I know. I'm sorry. I panicked. Carmen was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Roberto is dangerous, Daniel. He was my boyfriend before you. When I finally got away from him and started dating you, I thought I was free. But then I found out I was pregnant and I knew the baby had to be his. The timing didn't match up with us, so you lied to me. Yes, I lied, because I was terrified Roberto would find out and come after me. After Sophia. Daniel stood up and walked to the window. He needed to move, to process what he was hearing. This whole time, every moment I've spent taking care of Sophia, helping you, losing my job, losing Lisa, it was all based on a lie. I know. And I'm sorry. But Daniel, you have to understand. Roberto isn't like you. When we were together, he hurt me. He said terrible things. He threatened me. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I had to get away from him. So I moved, changed my phone number, quit my job. I tried to disappear, but you listed me as the father. Why would you do that? Carmen wiped her eyes. Because you were the only good man I knew. The only person who ever made me feel safe. I thought if Roberto tried to find Sophia, having another name on the birth certificate might protect her. And when the nurse called you, I thought maybe you wouldn't come. Maybe you'd just ignore it and I'd figure something else out. But you came. You stayed. You helped us. Daniel turned to look at her. Did you ever plan to tell me the truth? Yes, I swear I did. I was just scared. Scared you'd leave. Scared I'd be alone again. Sophia started crying from the other room. Carmen stood up to go to her, but Daniel held up his hand. I'll get her, he said. He walked to the bedroom and picked up Sophia from her crib. She was 3 weeks old now, still so tiny and fragile. Her eyes had started to change color, turning from dark blue to brown. She grabbed his finger like she always did, holding on tight. Looking down at her, Daniel realized something. It didn't matter that she wasn't his biological daughter. Somewhere over the past 3 weeks, she'd become his daughter anyway. In all the ways that mattered, she was his. But that didn't change the fact that Carmen had lied to him. That everything he'd done was based on false information. He changed Sophia's diaper and brought her back to the kitchen. Carmen was still sitting at the table, looking miserable. Tell me about Roberto, Daniel said, sitting down with Sophia in his arms. Carmen took a shaky breath. We met 2 years ago. At first he seemed nice, charming, but after a few months things changed. He got jealous if I talked to other men. He wanted to know where I was all the time. Then he started getting angry over little things. He pushed me once during an argument. Then it happened again. And again. Did you report it? No, I was ashamed. And scared. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure I regretted it. So I just tried to be perfect, to not make him angry, but nothing I did was good enough. How did you get away? One day he went out of town for work. I packed a bag and left. I moved in with Yolanda from the bakery for a few weeks, then found that basement apartment. I thought I was safe. Then I found out I was pregnant. Daniel looked down at Sophia. She was falling asleep against his chest, her breathing slow and steady. And you're sure he's the father? Yes, the timing is right. With you and me, we were always careful. But with Roberto, toward the end, he didn't care what I wanted. Daniel understood what she meant. His jaw clenched. So what does he want now? According to the letter, he wants custody. He found out somehow that I had a baby. Maybe someone from the hospital told him. Maybe my mother did. I don't know. But now he's claiming parental rights. Can he do that? After everything he did to you? I don't know. I've never dealt with anything like this. Carmen looked terrified. Daniel, if he gets custody, he'll use Sophia to control me. Or worse, he might hurt her just to